the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
It's still not the same after him.
Joe Milton. Just how bad was Joe Milton this week? Jack Foster. And is there any positives that you pull from this performance for Vol fans going into Alabama week?
Funny, Josh Heupel was asked that post-game, what was something positive you saw from Joe Milton? And he took a minute to answer because I'm sure it was hard to pause and answer. And he said, just the fact that he gets ready to compete every play, which is like,
okay. Was that really his first thing he said when he was asked this question?
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. Let me go pull up the transcript.
Just his his like competitiveness and fighting for his team every play like that. The positive from what he did on the field is that he ran pretty well. That's the only thing. As far as the passing goes, and the Keaton touchdown would have helped his numbers a little bit, and that was a pretty good throw. But yeah.
You also scored a touchdown on that drive. I think people keep citing that one. I'm like, they scored a touchdown on that drive. Like,
it didn't matter in the fact of the game, but a 42-yard touchdown for Joe would have looked better. He just still had one touchdown, but he had more yards, and you'd have remembered that play rather than a flat to Jacob Warren that was easy money. But yes, he was horrific last night. There were so many times, countless, where a receiver or pass catcher would be open in the middle of the field, and I see him staring at him. Like, he sees it, and he's not getting pressure. He's got a clean pocket, and he's just not throwing the ball. I literally don't know what was going on with Joe Milton last night. And I've been a Joe Milton defender for the majority of this season, but last night was other level bad. He's holding onto the ball way too long. His pocket presence was really bad, even for him last night, because that's the worst part about his game. It was not good at all. Not good at all. And Brian made this point on the RTI postgame podcast that there were a couple of times to where if Joe Milton would have made a better throw, they'd probably got a DPI call. But the throws are so bad, so just sailing out of bounds or way over someone's head or way too deep that it's uncatchable. And honestly, they got some calls that I probably would not have given them because the balls were uncatchable, but it was one or two DPI calls they actually got that were, a benefit. So it was really bad. Is
Ramel just surprised when the ball's on the money now? Like, because so many of those are behind him over the middle, where it's like when he's now dropping the easy ones because it's like, oh, it's actually where it was supposed to be that time. I wonder if that's part of Ramel. He just cannot get in a groove with him.
Feels like his first target of the season was a dropped wide open touchdown. So
that's
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to be positive about Ramel. Yeah. It hurts my soul that Ramel has been as bad as he's been all year. Like, it just hurts me.
Josh Heupel and what he liked about Joe Milton's performance. Through all the ups and downs, he continued to fight, continued to compete, continued to be willing to go out there and play the next play. And it's where it starts as a competitor. So love that part. There's things that offensively, all 11, we got to be better, coaches included.
So basically, yeah.
And it's tough too because you can't even I've moved on from it's Nico time. I shout out to Rob Lewis at VolQuest, leading his post gamer with what else? Are we sure Nico can't do what you're getting from Joe at this point? The people who are worried about, he must be worried because that's the other part is now there are fans who are like, oh well, what is Nico like at practice if he can't be better than the Joe? It's it's not a practice thing. That's not what's happening here.
I have a thought on this.
Okay, go for it.
And Joe is very conservative and tentative. And he made the really bad interception where he shouldn't have thrown it. But for the most part, like I said, he's holding onto the ball too long. He's not trying to take any chances.
Yeah.
And that's probably a product of the coaching staff a little bit too. But anyway, maybe Nico's the total opposite. And Nico's just going to come out firing. And, if he makes a bad play, then he makes a bad play. So maybe the downside with Nico is actually worse because he's going to take so many more chances. And that's more opportunity for turnovers. But obviously the highs are going to be higher than anything Joe Milton's doing.
Also, that 4th and 7 rollout call is oh, that was a Nico call. That's if you have Nico Iamaleava on that play, I think that's okay play call on 4th and 7. Joe Milton was never threading the needle there on a rollout where he's not able to plant his foot and just has to wait and try to hit a sideline foot planted grab. I don't even know who it was. Was that Ramel on the right hand side that he tried to fit it into? That's not going to happen. That's a Nico type throw. So I don't know. I mean, that's wild that was Heupel's first. Because it's just, what are you going to say? Because I read the comments too. Like, I'll see different posts and they're like, that's our guy. Like, I think Caleb Herring had something under a Joe Milton post on Instagram that I saw. Like, he's so likable and every fan wants him to do well. And I think he just leads the locker room. He's the leader. You can't make this change. And the other part of it is like, you're winning. Like, it's one thing if you're losing week in, week out with Joe and these offensive performances are happening, but you're winning. So you can't make this change. Like, you're 5-1 and he's been awful, but I mean, you just can't do it.
I think the talks
can't make it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think we're going to say the same thing. You can't do it going to Alabama and then on the road again at Kentucky. I mean, you can. It's just not a time you're going to make a change, especially after a win. So you're right. I mean, I've always been hesitant to say Tennessee's, Nico's just better than Joe, because I have not watched Nico Iamaleava play any significant football in his entire life. So who am I to know what Tennessee has in Nico? But to your point, it's hard for me to think that yesterday Nico could have been any worse than Joe Milton was. I mean, it's very hard to fathom that being possible.
Well, I go back to the field goal miss from A&M, and that was after Milton threw the end zone pick. If they make that field goal and win the game, we're talking about that end zone pick a lot more and how that lost Tennessee the game. And then maybe the talks of a quarterback change are getting ramped up, even though Bama is next week and there's more buzz around that. So, yeah, a couple of other things could have fallen Texas A&M's way to where we're talking about that a lot more. I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
I also just think we're going to learn a lot more because, like, he's gotten through to this point. You're halfway through the season, and we've talked about what the record will be. We're talking about 9-3, 8-4 with Joe riding the rest of the way. And if this staff thinks Joe, if they can keep him to this point in, like, look, the running game being as dominant as it is, the offensive line being healthy, and the defense being as good as it is, I think there's this belief of, like, let's not rock the boat if we can still find it. Because that's the thing that drives me nuts, is there are still fans who are like, we control our own destiny, like Tennessee can still get to Atlanta. Like, no, this team cannot get to Atlanta. Let's just, I want everyone to be, like, reasonable with this Tennessee offense and what they can actually be. Because it's like, no, they're not going 11-1. That's not happening. This team got who they were on the road at Florida, like, that's still going to rear its ugly head, I think, one of these road SEC games that they have left to go. So when you think about all that, I just think, hey, if you can get to 9-3 with Joe and it's ugly and it's terrible, but you can get there and then maybe win a bowl game or make the change for the bowl game. Be like, hey, Nico, do you want to get your first start in bowl game against some second teamers who we're playing? Probably not. But I mean, I get the idea of just let's get out of this year and just get to Nico next year with a bunch of new guys and everything else. But, like, if we believe in our heart of hearts that we can get to 9-3, even with this version of Joe Milton, why make a change? But if you feel like 7-5, 6-6 is on the table, then obviously you have to make different choices. But I think because they've won enough, I don't think the staff is just like, we're rocking the locker room boat. And I understand that.
That's the point. Is the locker room point. Is especially, like, you're right, Tennessee's not winning the SEC. That's not happening. But as long as that's that's possible to do, and you talked about all offseason that's your goal is to win the SECs, you're not going to make a change with the guy at quarterback that everybody likes, and you're still alive in that boat. I'm doubtful, to your point, that they're going to do that even if they split the next two games at Alabama and Kentucky. But no, you're right, and it does feel like it's like what I said at the beginning when we're talking about how Tennessee fans should feel about this game. This team's not going to accomplish any great championships. This is about maintaining as much respect and positive momentum moving forward where the program is, where you look at this season and say, yeah, Tennessee took a step back. How could you not, losing the quarterback and receivers that they did? But they were still very respectable, one of the top teams in the SEC, and it's clear that Josh Heupel and his staff still have this thing moving very much in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so. Last thing on all of this before we talk Alabama real quick and wrap up here. The wide receivers who are picking up more attention. I think that's also helping the Joe Milton conversation is guys aren't getting open. Y'all are eyes in the sky. Y'all are seeing. You said, Jack, you mentioned Joe missing some guys in this one. I mean, how much of it is fair to put on the receivers, to put on Ramel Keaton, who's had a horrible year. The loss of Brew McCoy, even what we saw from Brew McCoy earlier, how much of it is on the receivers not getting that separation and not helping bail out Joe Milton, similar to the way that Cedric Tillman and Jaylen Wright?